Well, thank you so much for joining us. This particular project creates an animation and adds it as a gadget. And the purpose of this gadget in this example, in this demonstration, is to show performance, just to show how well the student is doing, give them some sort of visual indicator of that. So what we have is kind of a demo lesson on Curiosity, the NASA project Curiosity. And now when we get to a page where we're accountable for content, suddenly we have a score of 0 out of 100 because we haven't attempted these questions yet. And these are just really lame questions, but they kind of demonstrate what happens with this gadget, a gadget that we'll create in a minute. But essentially, so let's say I answer a question correctly, A plus B is 3, and I submit. Now I've gotten roughly 50% of my questions right, and we can tweak this a little bit. Essentially, this gets brighter and brighter as our percentage of correct goes up. And of course, if we answer this one totally correctly, then we've just scored 100 out of 100, and you can see this lights up. But then on the next page, we're accountable for this question, so you can see these things dim, and we've answered that incorrectly, and then we'll continue to answer some of these questions incorrectly so you can see what's happening. Here's a short answer. I've gotten it wrong, and let me continue. Here's an interview question. I'll get this one wrong. And so now you can see I'm sort of at the 40% mark here. So the lights here get weaker and weaker. So this is an animation, and we're essentially controlling this animation by listening to the report of student progress. So we listen to the report and we adjust the animation accordingly. That's what I'm about to show you. So here we are within LodeStar, and these pages just typically have example questions. So here's a widget, and we set up the widget with a 3-point value. Here's another widget, and it has a 3-point value. And we have a question page, and we've indicated the right answer here. So Mervyn was not one of the NASA rovers, but all these others were. And again, we've given this thing 3 points. So what we have here is a lesson with questions. And as a student answers these questions, it reports the total score and the user score. And what we're doing is listening for a change in report and updating the animation. So our animation, we erected a wall here, and then we have a couple of pieces after the wall. So essentially, the student can navigate to page 20. They can't go to 21 because there's a wall. And we have a couple of assets after the wall. One is our animation. We created a graphic as an SVG graphic. And essentially, we just created this graphic. Clicking on SVG, I'll go in and edit the graphic now. So this graphic is really basic. What we created here was created a rectangle and then took this tool here and rounded, just created a radius. Then after that, constructed some rectangles like so. And I gave the rectangular color. And I titled the rectangle. So here we can see in the original, we had tile 1, tile 2, tile 3, and so forth. And that's what I would do here, is give each of my rectangles, I would give them each an identity. Now I can't call this tile 1, so I'll just call this tile 10. Here, I'll call it 0, 1. There we go. And then I can clone it. So once I have it the way I want it, I can clone it and essentially construct what I've constructed here. So very, very simple. All we have here is a rectangle and then 5 rectangles that show progress. Right here, you can see this rectangle is a little off in color. Okay, I won't bother saving that, but that's all we've done here. Then I went into the animation tools and I selected one of the items. So I can, if I put the timeline right along here, I'll have an easy time of selecting, but I could also select this way, tile 1. So this is the timeline for tile 1. So essentially what happens is we constructed a keyframe right at the 1 second mark. The whole animation is 5 seconds. So each element has its own timeline. We're dealing with a tile timeline for tile 1. Okay, so at the 1 second mark, we add a keyframe. So I'll show you that. I'll delete this keyframe and show you what I did. I went to the 1 second mark, see 0, 1, and I clicked on this little right here next to opacity. I clicked on this little diamond that adds a keyframe. And then I gave, while this is still selected, I got to make sure, this is selected. You can tell it's selected by it turning red. Notice black, black, black. Once I'm over the keyframe, boom. Now I can go ahead and change opacity, and I'll change that to 100. So between 0 and 1 second, we get this gradual easing to 100% opacity. If I look at tile 2, so let me switch over to tile 2. Tile 2, I added a keyframe here at the 2 second mark. And so I'm giving it full opacity, 100% here at the 2 second mark. And you can imagine what's happening from here. Tile 3, there we go. Now, one of the things that you may not like is the fact that, let's say with tile 4, one of the things you may not like is there is the tile 4 is kind of lighting up gradually as we get to this. It's full opacity by this point. You may not like that. So let's just play with that a little bit. Let's say at the 3 second mark, we're really not going to start showing tile 4 at all until about the 3 second mark. And so I'll add a keyframe. And so now it's totally, oh, sorry, I added the keyframe at the wrong spot. Let's delete that. I did it under rotates. Let's add a keyframe under opacity. And let's give that an opacity of 0. So this thing is completely off. Here at 0. And then what I can do is gradually ease it in. So here we go. Now we're easing the color into full. And let's do the same thing with tile 5. So tile 5, you can tell we're on tile 5. You can see that right here. So tile 5, I really don't want to start displaying it until about the 4 second mark. So again, under opacity, I'll add a keyframe. There we go. And I'll say this is 0. It's absolutely 0. No opacity until this point, and then I'll ease it in. So it's kind of looking like this. So if we scrub the timeline, we can kind of see how this is working right here. And I'll go ahead and save that. I kind of like that. Okay, so that gives us our animation. Essentially, it's a 5 second animation, and what we're going to do is based on student performance is we're going to advance the timeline to a certain point. So if they've achieved 20%, timeline will definitely show this as fully green, 40%, 60, 80, 100, so forth. Okay, the next thing that we have to do is we need to create a page which will serve as a listener. And here's where some code comes in. So let's go ahead and edit this. By the way, I can edit right here with the help. This provides all the functionality that we need and a little description of the functionality. And the key functionality here is going to be get user score. So it tells us that it returns the system's user score. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a function, and that's what we have here. Let me go into the full editor just to show you this a little more clearly. So we have get user score, which is a function. The purpose of this function is to retrieve from the system the current user score. And then we're going to assign that to a variable. So we use variable, VAR means variable. User score is kind of placed in short-term memory that will hold the user score. We do the same thing with total score. And we know we also have a way of getting help from this point here. So get total score tells us that we're going to return the system's total score. And then we assign that to a local variable, a variable that's in short-term memory. Then essentially we're going to calculate a percentage. So user score divided by user total will give us something from 0 to 1. It'll give, like 50% will be 0.5, and that'll be assigned to the variable called percentage. And then we're going to update animation. And what's helpful here is to bring up, if you typed in animation, this will give you all the functions for animation. In this case, update animation. It has quite a few parameters, and a lot of these parameters are optional, but I'll explain what they are. All of this explains it, but essentially, update animation, the first argument, functions like update animation, they always have parentheses. You got to be very careful. It's very picky. So they have parentheses, and then these things are called arguments, these different values that are separated by commas. So we have update animation. The very first argument, the very first thing you put in is update the animation of what? And for us, it's going to be meter, which is the page ID that the animation's in, meter, comma. What do we want to do with the animation? In this case, we want to play it as opposed to pause or reverse it. And then what's the current time? We're going to run the animation from what current time, and it'll be 0 seconds. How long will our animation take? In this case, 3 seconds. And then this is a tricky one. So think of this, the percentage as being the point on the timeline where we'll pause the animation. That's not quite accurate. This parameter or argument is called iteration start. But for now, to keep things simple, think of this as playing from 0 to the percentage of the timeline. So if, for example, the user score was 5 out of 10, percentage would be 0.5. This will take us halfway. It'll run over a duration of 3 seconds. It'll run from 0 time to the halfway point of the timeline. That's what's happening here. And so, definitely the first tile will light up, the second tile will light up, and the third tile will be almost completely lit up at the halfway point. So that's what's happening here. Again, these are variables. We're using functions. Functions are retrieving value from the system and assigning them to the variable. We're then performing a simple calculation. User score over user total gives us a percentage. And then we're running the animation up to that point of the timeline. If percentage is 1, that'll take us through 100% of the timeline, all 5 seconds. If the user score was, let's say, 1 out of 5, then essentially we're going to go 20% down the timeline. And it just takes a little practice. And one of the things you can do is just test this to see if there are any errors. Now, let's say we forgot something like this and we test it. All of a sudden, you get this storm of problems, and you can eliminate that by just going ahead and putting in the right value and testing again. And we got a problem here somewhere. Oh, we're missing our quotes. Here we go. Now let's test, and we see no errors found. Now, later, when you get more advanced at this, the one thing that it will show you, if you're using objects with dot notation, this thing will complain about that, even though it's perfectly legitimate. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, just keep it simple and think about these functions and these variables. And then this very important function called update animation, which has the name of the animation, what you want to do with it, in this case, play it from the 0-second mark. The duration of the animation is 3 seconds, and this takes us to a specific spot in the animation. And this, in our example, about halfway through, depending on what percentage evaluates to. All of these lines they end with semicolons. Okay. So we're going to save and close. Save. Again, you can do the same thing right from here, but it helps with the editor to find errors. Okay. So this page we called listener. The page with this code is called listener. And now basically we have to register this listener. So this code gets invoked, gets called, gets executed every time there's an update in the report. And the way that happens is right here in introduction on the first page, we do a couple of things. First of all, we command the system. We're saying we're interested in listening to report. So report is a standard. Later on, you can create your own, when you get more advanced, you can create your own events, and you can call those events anything you want, and then listen for those events. In this case, this is a standard system event called report. So this is, I didn't make this up. This is baked into the system. So we're listening for report. Notice report is inside quotation marks. So we're listening to report. And who's our listener? What code is going to get executed every time there's an update in the report? It's the code that's in the page with the ID listener. So this is what registers that page is interested in any changes to the report. And then we're going to take our meter. You got to be very careful, because the meter is on a page, and basically it's making the page a gadget. So keep the meter towards the top. I centered the meter. I didn't add anything after the meter on the page, so that the meter will fit nicely as a gadget at the bottom of our presentation. And then I'm basically setting the animation. I'm updating the animation so that what we're doing here is we're essentially just stopping it at 0. So update animation meter, I'm playing. The current time is 0. and the duration is 0. And here, I'll tell you what, I think iteration start can't be 0. I think that's a problem. So I'll just do like 0.1 or something like that. Okay, so save and close. And then let's play it, and let's explain it one more time now that we know the pieces. So we created an animation on a page called meter. And now as the first page loads, it's basically set to listen to report. Okay, so that function update animation did not work, and I'd have to figure out why. But once we get to a page where, oh, I know why, because at this point, yeah. So to keep things simple, this page is the first page that actually does a report. And it's reporting right now that this student is now responsible for a total of 6 points. So because LodeStar supports branching, we can't have a set total because branches might involve different questions and so forth. So once a page is exposed to you, you're responsible for that page. Once this page is shown to the students, they're responsible for 6 points. Now, if we go ahead and if we answer this, let's just answer this correctly. You can see that I'm just about at the halfway point. So I've gotten 3 out of the 6 points. And then here, maybe I'll answer this partially correctly. And you can see I've gotten this partially correct. I did not answer both not -3 and 3. So this required both -3 and 3. So I got partial credit, 2/3. So essentially I've gotten 5 out of 6 points, and that's what you see indicated here. And because we changed the animation so that we put in keyframes, this is not lit up at all. And then as we progress, now we're responsible for more. Let's get this one right. Okay. And it just shows us our progress here as we move through. So right now, this is, this was just another animation that I have baked into the LodeStar system. This is just a meter, but you can see these two are basically identical here. You can see they basically are telling us the same thing. Now, let's answer this correctly. This is the best answer. Our meter goes up, and so does, you can see that these two things are basically aligned. And that kind of concludes the use of an animation, listening for the report, and then updating that animation based on it.